Buckingham, and I'm the Managing Director of Spectrum Analysis in Melbourne. I'd like to give special thanks to Sue Elson, who is coordinating this webinar, along with Dorianne Lyons, our new Business Development Manager at Spectrum Analysis. And Dorianne will hopefully be in contact with quite a few people over the next few weeks. It has been interesting to hear over the last 12 months of COVID, all our government leaders saying their decisions are based on the data. Personally, I love it, as it's been what we've been preaching now for over 20 years. Our motto at Spectrum has always been using data to make better business decisions. And this applies to many of our larger clients like Aussie Home Loans, F45 Training, whose mapping we run worldwide, 7-Eleven, and many other franchise council association members and clients we've had for many years. And our view has always been that the same should apply to schools, colleges and universities. So schools, colleges and universities always like to have a strategic plan and to define their future objectives. And to me, accurate data and demographics are essential. Like in business, you need to forecast your revenues, or in schools, colleges and universities, they really need to forecast the number of students based on data. And this is one of the most important sets of numbers that anyone should be thinking of when they're putting together their strategic plan. So think of a strategic plan as having both a quantitative and a qualitative component. Now, today, and what we are all about, is the quantitative part. Can we count it or measure it and use it in our decision making? The qualitative parts are also important, but really they're not our type of work to describe. So this is often where schools may have focus groups or broad surveys of parents, even things from above, directions of faith are often concerned. These are the things that really are the more qualitative issues and not the hard numbers. So today I want to talk about a few facts. And I'm going to start off with our hard numbers. Bring that up. So we really want to start by talking of, do we have a strategic plan? Should it be quantitative and qualitative? What quantitative components can we use? What other information should a school consider? And mapping. Mapping for everyone is really, and if you have it all set up in mapping, you can do a lot of things in a DIY type of manner. And we can talk about that, not so much today, but this will give you an idea of the type of data we believe is important. So what I want to talk about is the census 2016 and 21, what's happening. Other data that's in the census that really relates to schools specifically. I then want to talk about the ABS, Australian Bureau of Statistics, population projections, 2017 to 2032. We like to talk about CEFA, which stands for Socio-Economic Index for Areas. And then CEFA has a relationship that obviously higher CEFA tends to have more independent school students. Lower CEFA tends to be more towards government school. And finally, data that's free and available. We call it, there's two things, the My Schools data and the ACARA data. Okay, so let's start off by talking about the census. The 2016 census cost just on $500 million, and it involved actually 38,000 field staff. Now, many of us remember it had a bit of a stuff up. A lot of things crashed over census night. Originally, it was going to cost 450, and they ended up having to pump another 50 million in to make it correct. So we are coming up to census night this year, and it's expected to be a $500 million exercise, according to Dr. David Gruen, who is the head of the ABS. So census night will be 10th of August, 2021. And we don't expect to actually have the full release of the census data till around June 2022. That's the current indication. So at the moment, we're using the 2016 census and we're making changes and doing things to adjust that. And there is things that happen to keep it as accurate as possible. Now, when they do the census, they actually collect it in 57,000 separate little areas. But think of that like tiles. Think you're doing a mosaic. The tiles, the little bits you start with, 57,000 of the little blighters. And they're called SA1s, or Standard Area 1. SA1s fit into 2,310 SA2s. Now, SA2s, by comparison, are roughly 10,000 people. And to give you an idea, in Australia, we have 2,630 postcodes. So in many cases, SA2s postcodes similar. SA2s go into SA3s, of which there's 360 of those. I didn't want to see that. I didn't want to see that at the moment. I didn't want it. I'm coming back. Okay, hopefully you're seeing me, because that's where I'm wanting to be at the moment. That'll come up in a minute. Okay, so we have 22,310 SA2s and 2,630 SA3s. So a lot of the government data we get comes out at SA2. And that becomes very relevant for when you actually see your mapping and you do things with it. So from the SA2s, they then fit into 360 SA3s, and it gets bigger from there. So when I'm talking and showing some examples a bit further on, we'll actually be looking at SA2s because that's what the government give us. Okay, so specific data relating to schools. So, sorry, I'll rephrase. The census is going to come out and give us all of this data. You'll start hearing later this year about how many people are in Australia and really raw, basic stuff they start with, which state will be growing more than the others. That's all very nice, but when we get down to the detail we need, it's really the detail that comes out in June. And that's when we'll be able to really make some interesting things. So there's some specific data relating to schools that people need to be very aware of. And the first one is, in a census, right down to every SA1, but we can do it at SA2 or suburb, it tells us how many children went to school. It tells us whether they were in primary school or secondary school or preschool. It tells us whether they're boys or girls, and it tells us whether they're going to government school, independent school, or Catholic school. So I'll show an example a bit further on where we look at specific area, and you can see right down to detail of how many children go to come out of each area, and you can then start making some assessments on what the demand is going to be. We can also, in our mapping, we have some ways of comparing this, because longitudinally, we have done this for the 2006 census, 2011 and 2016. So you can look at any area or your area and say, what was it in 2006? What was it in 11? What is it now in 2016? And obviously we'll see what it's going to be in 2021. So we're really trying to see if an area is growing and having more independent students or if it's dropping away. Now, while that's really interesting for the past, the most important data I feel we need and use in schools is going forward is the population projections. Every state government loves to do its own population projections. And some state governments will predict out to 2045 and all sorts of things. And as of reasonably short, well, I'll say about a year ago, even some of the state governments, they were starting from the 2016 census and that 2011 census, sorry, and they're running from like 2015 through to 2045. Anyway, the very nice people at the ABS, every 5 years, they get into a cycle, normally about 2 years after census release, that finally the Department of Health get frustrated with everybody else and say to the Prime Minister, can you please get the ABS to give us some accurate data so we can forecast where we put hospitals? So in October 2019, for the Department of Health, a whole set of data was released that talks about every area from 2017, 1 year after the 2016 census, out to 2032. The beauty is that is an ABS data set, so it's consistent Australia-wide. So the ABS, they go to each state and say, tell me what's happening in your state, and the states go to each council and say, tell me what's happening in your council. Eventually it gets to the top, and then the beauty of using the ABS data is it has the big picture, whether there's extra migration expected into Australia, all the sort of political issues that can have some effect, whether there's going to be another baby boomer bonus that the Treasurer did some years ago, who knows? But to us, the gold medal data is the ABS data 2017 to 2032. Now, it breaks it up by male, female. So for girls' schools, we can see how many girls, or boys' schools, or general. And it also tells us by 5-year age group. So it tells how many 0 to 4-year-olds, how many 5 to 9-year-olds, how many 10 to 14-year-olds, how many 15 to 19-year-olds. So with even a little bit of very simple arithmetic, we can make that into how many primary school kids, how many secondary school kids approximately are you going to see in an area. Now, we often just use 5 to 19-year-olds as proxy for probably school-age kids or children, because what we're trying to look for is where areas are growing and where they're not. So that to us is, by using the ABS, it's not being biased by individual states. Maybe some states think they're going to grow more than they actually will. A bit optimistic, a few things are happening and they think it's going to go great. Whereas what we really like is to use something where the federal government have one view over the top, a national overview. So their starting point was the 2016 census, and they've built it up from there. As I said, there are some I had a look at recently in another, it was population projections from 2016 to 2056. And the ABS used to do population projections further out, but I think they've got smarter and worked out that by putting their head on the block, trying to go past 2032, they're only opening up for major issues. Now, when I do show you a little bit of data, or we can actually see certain areas now, and some of them are what we'll call empty nester type areas. A couple of classics are ones like Endeavour Hills and Mill Park in Victoria. Sydney, I'll give a little example of Port Stephens. And these areas are still growing in total population. But what's happening is the number of school-age children is not growing. They're actually going backwards. The opposite to that is probably the areas like Tarneet and in the areas on the north of Werribee here in Melbourne. They're absolutely growing, number one, in total population, but ballistically in the number of children. Very high producing families in those areas. So to us, the really main data we should be looking at is this population growth data, which we can deal with. And when we do our mapping, it's all there in the mapping. The next thing I want to talk about and touch on is CEFA, Socio-Economic Index for Areas. CEFA is all about whether you live in a high socio-economic area or low socio-economic area. And every area in Australia is rated with a CEFA score. Mr. and Mrs. Average live in roughly CEFA score of 1,000. 1,100 is one standard deviation to the good, 900 one to the poor, and 1,200 is very good. So if you're living in Bellevue Hill next to Kerry Packer, or where Kerry used to live, you might be 1,300. And if you're living out the back of Meekatharra under some gum trees, you might be down at 600 or 700. So everything has a rating. There's obviously a very strong rating between the CEFA score of an area and the percentage of children that go to independent school. Now, I will show a little example later, which will show an area in Sydney, the eastern suburbs, and that rates at roughly 80% of all school children in that eastern suburbs. Think of it around Bellevue Hill and where Cranbrook and Scots are. 80% of the children go to independent school. And you can go to some area out the back of, I'll say at the back near St Mary's, and it might only be 10 or 20% or even 5% go to independent school. What we're really seeing is that this data is there is a very strong relationship between the CEFA score and the percentage of children going to independent school. So if we can look at an area that's got high growth and high CEFA, we're going to have a very double whammy effect of a good number going to independent schools. Okay, the next data I want to talk about is My Schools and ACARA. Now, the My Schools data, this is publicly available data for everybody, and we use it in our web-based mapping. I think there are roughly 9,000 schools we have mapped, and it tells us number of government schools, number of Catholic schools, number of independent schools. It tells us whether a campus is the main campus or a secondary campus. And it tells us how many individual students, male or female, go to that school. And it also gives us the full-time equivalent teacher numbers. So you can start getting some feeling of how you compare to other schools in your area, and just different feels of what schools are around. Now, the second data we sometimes look at is the My School data. And this is only available at individual schools, but we use it to look at things like how much funding contribution is coming in from the students. It then gives an estimate, an approximate of what the fees are of that school. And it also gives us good data on what the school age population is from 2014 through to 2019. So if we're dealing with the schools, and let's say we're doing a job for a school, they want to know what all the surrounding schools are doing, we can say, well, this is what the school age number of enrolments were in 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and obviously compare that to themselves. And it's quite interesting when it's often a bit of a story around, some schools dropped off, that's when a headmaster changed or a headmistress changed, or something else has happened that the school actually very much fills us in on the facts. And that's really handy to be able to look at the My School data. As I said, that financial information is really interesting when you start to compare different schools and different estimates. Now, we've even gone through and looked at what the average per student is on the fees contributions and lined that up against looking at the school's website and seeing what their year 12 fees are. And it's pretty close. Apples are comparing to apples fairly well in those cases. So it's just a good way of being able to see where you sit compared to other schools. Okay, I'll just come back to my slides. Okay, so the second thing is, if we know we've got a lot of information available from the ABS that really has great input to your potential strategic plan, then the second part of all this is, what data do you hold yourselves and how can you use that? Now, when we do a lot of projects, we actually ask for all of the student addresses, the date of birth of the child, the address, the feeder school they came from, what year they're in, and whether they use the school buses. Now, when you start bringing all this data together, you start being able to look at things like, we'll call it market share or penetration. How many children come out of any specific area at your school compared to how many are available? So it might be as low down as an SA1. SA1's on average is 600 to 800 people live in an SA1. You might have 6 or 8 children coming out of that specific SA1. And we can see from the census data that 30 or 40 children went to independent school from that SA1. So you can start seeing what your market share or penetration is for every SA1. We can then bring that up to be suburb, which we can do. We can then bring that up to be either postcode or SA2, but we start to be able to see where you're strong and where you're not, which obviously has a big impact on your logic of your marketing strategies. Now, as well as being able to do that for existing students at your school, we can do it for all future enrolments. And it's very interesting when you go and map or line up all the future enrolments, and sometimes we'll even map them by each year that they're coming to your school and be able to see where they're coming from compared to where the current students are. Now, if there's a big growth corridor in your area, or maybe the growth corridor is 5 kilometres or 10 kilometres away, and it's in easy connection with a bus route, maybe we should be marketing into that area more than we currently are. And it's interesting when you do this, what year they're coming to the school. We did a school in Perth recently and was able to plot all of the children coming right through to 2032. And it worked out 4 of the mothers must have enrolled their daughters literally on the way home from hospital to have them lined up to go to this specific school. So it's how far ahead it can go. The other part of that comes interesting is this using your school buses. Again, if we're able to mark in a mapping context and say, here are all the students that go to the school, here are all our bus routes lined up. Now, these are the children that are getting on the buses and these ones aren't. Maybe it gives you a really strong position to be able to say, to just communicate with those parents. Maybe they don't know the bus runs within 400 metres of their house, do not know. But at least it gives you a way of looking at your buses and starting to say, if we could get a few more children on this bus, maybe it would work better. Or maybe we should move our bus route a little bit so it picks up the current students. Buses are always an interesting part. The next part is alumni, and we quite often will map where all the past students now are, and that could just be for some schools that might have multi-campuses. Where do we run the old boys or old girls or the overall alumni dinner, just so we know what's going to where we've got our best chance of getting as much bang for our buck. The other point in all this with the feeder schools is if we know what schools children have come from, and we often also get the data from 2016, we can look at different schools and say, are we improving or not? Maybe there's some school that you've now got 30 children at your school have come out of some primary school, and you look at the future and you might only be getting 2 or 3 out of it. Or you look at how it was in 2016 and you said, gee, we had 40 children come from that school in 2016. We now only have 30 children coming from that school. What's changed? Maybe we need to be marketing more at that school. Maybe we need to have a scholarship to the best sports child from that school. I'm not here to tell you how to do your marketing. What we're here to do is to say, this is the sort of data that you can get out of your information with the type of projects that are often done that we get involved with. So think of it in terms that you've got your data and then this overall census and other data, and how can we bring these two things together? Okay, so I want to go into some examples of information of what we can actually see and do. Now, these are tables. Tables obviously can become part of web-based mapping systems, and we get to be able to use them a lot more. So I'm sorry this one's in small, but it has to be just because of the way it is, and hopefully you can see it on your screen. So this is the ABS data that allows us to look at any specific area and write down to any SA1, but this is done at an SA2. And why I've put 2 different ones up here is the first one is Mosman. I can't see the second, it's underneath my, something in my, sorry, I'm going to go back. The first one's Mosman, and the second one is a suburban area in New South Wales. Okay, so Mosman, we all know, is high socio-economic. It has a population of 28,475 and a CIFA of 1165. Now, you might remember me saying 1,200 is really, really good. 1,300 is living next door to Kerry Packer. So 1165 for a suburb or an SA2 is very high socio-economic. Most people would know Mosman in Sydney. So now we can actually tell that preschool, there were 217 boys and 259 girls. At government primary school, 523 and 524, Catholic schools and independent. And then total primary, there was 1223 males and 1105 females. Now, what gets interesting is what is that change as we go to secondary school? So we can see it's now 182 males and 227 females at government. You can see it's the Catholic, you can see the independent. So what we've then done, and we use the computer, obviously, computation, it's not in the data to start, we can actually look at what percentage of children went to government school, what percentage went to Catholic and independent at primary, and then what that was like at secondary. And very typical of a high socioeconomic area, the government schools have gone from 48% at obviously primary to 22% at, I'll call it high schools here in Victoria. The Catholic schools have picked from 16% up to 20%. And the independent schools have gone from having 36% of the children to 58% of the children. Very typical of a very high socioeconomic. Now, if we look at the one on the right-hand side, the first thing we noticed, there was 12,000 people, and it had a CEFA of 937. So we're just below average CEFA, probably at about 40% if you thought of the system as sort of the worst being 0 and the absolute best being 100. We're probably at 40% or 30%, 35%. So you can all read the numbers going down, but I guess what's interesting is when you get to primary school, government, 65%, Catholic 23%, independent 12%. And then at secondary school, it's gone from up to 76%, down to 16% at Catholic, and down to 7% at independent. So this type of area, you can build a lot of independent schools, but you're probably just not going to attract that many of the children. And even the independent schools out in that way are probably the lower fee independent schools at the $8,000, $10,000 a year mark, not the $25,000 to $35,000, $40,000 that might be your top market APS and AGS type schools in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane and Perth. So that type of data is available for every area across Australia. So you really can start to get a feel of how many students are available, how big is the pot that you're trying to win students out of.
Peter, if I can just quickly interrupt, we've got a quick question from Michelle. She'd like to know what year is this data from, please?
Okay, this is the 2016 census.
Great, thank you.
Now, things will have changed, but I can tell you from my experience that it doesn't change that much. You can wait a long time and Mosman's not going to become St Mary's and St Mary's isn't going to become Mosman. Or in Melbourne terms, you know, Turac's not going to become Chelsea and Chelsea's not going to become Toorak. At the end of the day, we always find the CEFA scores and things like this don't move much over time. But when the 2021 census comes out at the middle of next year, expect, as I said, June next year, should be able to update this for every area in Australia. So right now, I wouldn't worry. An area, what it says it is, it's still going to be, other than maybe some very high growth areas in Sydney, Marsden Park, and in Melbourne, Truganina and Tarneit, they will have jumped through the roof. But general Melbourne, general Sydney, general Brisbane, it'll be pretty close to what's there. It'll be right at the moment. Okay, I'm going to take us to the next set of data I want to talk about. And this is population data for what's going to happen in the future. Now, I've told everybody my view is the released in 2019, this data 2017 to 2032, ABS Australia-wide is to me the best thing, consistency to start with. Everybody will have a story about their local areas got something different happening, but you can hear that all over ad infinitum. So let me talk this through. So I've used one area, Truganina, one of the biggest growth areas in Australia. Truganina and Tarneit are down near Werribee in Melbourne, and it is absolutely flying. So the way we show this in our mapping, or the way the data can come out, is we firstly talk about in 2017, 0 to 4-year-olds, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 19. So that's what the government believed was there in 2017 of children. In 2022, you can see the numbers. And again, look at the difference in the 0 to 4s, even to the 15 to 19s. It's just exploding in these young age group. By the time we get to 2027, this is starting to reflect, coming through and still exploding more in the youngest. By 2032, still going more here, but it's coming right through to these children that were probably in 2017 and now more up in the 15 to 19. Now, what we do is we ignore the 0 to 4s in each case and just add up the other three. So in 2017, 5241 should be the total of those three numbers. 9602 should be those three numbers, etc. So we're seeing an area that's expected to go from 5,241 children aged between 5 and 19 in 2017 to 18,725 students aged children in 2030. Now, this is a reasonably medium to lower socioeconomic. So we're not going to see 30%, 40% going to independent schools. Mind you, it can have quite a big Muslim population, which can mean those Muslim independent schools could be very, very strong in these areas. The net effect of going up 13,000 students is probably the equivalent, well, it's obviously the equivalent of about 13 new schools are required over that period. The population projection is 257% increase just in school-aged children into that area. So phenomenal growth. Now, we've actually identified there are about 12 areas in Australia that have that type of growth. Truganina and Tarnita are the two biggest. In Sydney, you've got your Marsden Park. Actually, your eastern suburbs are flying, are still predicted to fly for a long time more. I guess that's units and apartments coming in. Perth, you've got your Alkimos area and your down south Baldivis area. Brisbane, not that much, bit to the north, and then very strong in the Pimpama, where the worlds are, the sea worlds and things. So every state has quite a bit. Melbourne's actually got about 6 when we work it out. There's also ones up near the Doreen corridor and down into the southeast. So Melbourne's actually growing bigger to become, it will pass Sydney around 2026. That's the biggest city in Australia. So it's not surprising Melbourne's got this incredible growth. Sydney's got the incredible prices, I get, that's probably causing some of that incredible growth as people leave Sydney. Okay, the next thing, I just want to show a comparative type of area, and this is Rowville in Melbourne. Now, every state has these type of areas that were developed as a bigger state about 30 years ago, 30, 40 years ago. I can name them here in Melbourne: Rowville, Mill Park, these type of places. So those places went through a huge growth run in the 80s, 90s. The children went off to school, fantastic. Now, the mum and dads are still sitting in the house, they haven't moved on yet. Probably half the houses are still owned by mum and dad with no kids. And you're actually seeing a population for prediction of children, school-aged children, dropping. So it's expected to drop 9% or 202 children from 2,300 to 2,100. So, you know, you wouldn't be really thinking of opening a new campus in Rowville or Mill Park. And every city has these areas that were really, they were the growth corridors of the 80s and 90s. Sydney, it's a bit around Castle Hill, has a batch of it. And Melbourne's got a few of these ones where you're actually seeing the complete contrast where it's actually going to drop in student numbers. Now, I wanted to show this one as an interesting one. This is Nelson Bay, a project we've had a bit of a look at over the years. Now, Nelson Bay is actually picking up population. It's going to go from 21,000 to 24,000. Now, you don't have to be a genius to know, if you know New South Wales, it is very much a retirement area. It's north of Newcastle, lovely weather, all of those type of things. So it's actually picking up in population. It's going to go 2,926 according to the forecast, but the school-aged children is actually going to drop 4%, or about 152 less children. So coming out of that SA2 of Nelson Bay was expected to be, or believed to have been 3,540 in 2017, and that'll drop to about 3,388 by 2032. yet the population's going up. So the demographics really can give you a bit of a picture about what's for each different area, whether you're a high growth area, low growth, whether the area could be growing, but the school age children are not, or vice versa, obviously, like the one I showed at Tarneit, which is just growing through the roof. So this is the sort of data that's available that really, to me, makes a lot of sense for schools, be it at even SA2 level, like what I'm doing here, or sometimes you bring it up to SA3. And SA3 is probably a combination of 3 or 4 SA2s, so a school might feel more comfortable looking at a bigger area. But it's very good to be able to do the SA2s individually to look at the components within it. Now, this is a part of a bit of a job not long ago. And what's interesting here is we will often define for schools a major and a minor catchment area. So we will look at the major catchment area as probably where roughly, I'll say 60% of the students probably come from. The minor catchment area might be the next 20% of the students. And then we can compare this to Greater Sydney or Greater Melbourne or Greater Brisbane. We can compare it to New South Wales. We can compare it to Australia. Now, we'll just say our definition of Greater Sydney is Sydney, Newcastle, Wollongong and Central Coast. Our definition of Greater Melbourne is Melbourne, Geelong. Greater Brisbane is basically Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast and Brisbane. It's just where you sort of really aren't leaving metropolitan. There's no 50 or 100 kilometre barrier in between. So let's just follow this area. It was in a pretty high socio-economic area of Sydney, which is evident by the 1127 CEFA score. It had 533,000 people at the census. 79,000 were aged 5 to 18, representing 14%. The population growth is expected, total growth, 26.8% in this area. The 5 to 18-year-olds is expected to grow 28.4%. The CEFA is 1127. The average household income was 135 and the average age was 38.5. Now, what is interesting here is we can compare that, again, for your strategic plan against maybe your minor catchment where there are, might be 15, 20% of the children coming from a bit further out, let's say. We can compare it against Greater Sydney or Greater Melbourne. Now, the whole of Greater Sydney actually ends up rating a CEFA of 1032. Now, I will just explain CEFA is the ABS's way. If I go and ask people, how do we talk about what social economic is? You might say their average income. Someone else might say the price of their house. Someone else might say the level of unemployment. The ABS bring all this together to come up with one number. And naturally, because the price of housing and probably average incomes are a bit higher in Sydney, the average CEFA in Sydney is probably 1032. If I looked at the average CEFA in Adelaide, it's probably more like 960, 970. Not being critical of Adelaide, it's probably even have more disposable income to spend on education and other things for the average person because cost of houses is less, just cost of living is probably less. But we can at least compare apples to apples here where we can look at our area, look at it against Greater Sydney, look at it against total New South Wales, and even look at it against total Australia. So that makes a very good starting point to say what is our area like compared to others. The next one I just want to touch on, I did just earlier. This is using something from a secondary boys' school. Again, we can look at the major catchment area. We can see how many boys went to government school in their major catchment, how many went to Catholic, how many went to independent, and how many went to combined Catholic and independent. And sometimes we add those together because there is a bit of a discussion I've been having with a few principals about it's fairly easy to say, well, in an independent school, there's so many Muslim children or so many Hindu. It's fairly hard to say whether, in a lot of cases, whether there is a percentage of Catholic school going to maybe an Anglican school. Maybe there's not so many Anglicans going to the Catholic school, unless it might be in a specific regional area where the Catholic school is the most dominant one of the area, and people say, right, we'll do that. I'm not here to preach about faith. Just sometimes we sort of bring these two together And we do have schools are even appearing in the ACARA data. That's an interesting one we talk about is Xavier here in Melbourne actually appears as an independent school, yet St Kevin's here in Melbourne appears as a Catholic school. You could argue that they're both APS, associated public schools here in Melbourne, and I don't quite understand why the difference is, because I'm sure if you went and checked out with the students, 99% are probably of the Catholic faith, or their parents are. But we're just bringing the two together as potential. So again, we can look at that in major area, we can look at it in minor area, we can compare it to Greater Sydney, we can compare it to New South Wales, and we can compare it to the whole of Australia. So starts to give you something to think about in your strategic plan as to what your area looks like, whether you are high or low. If I went and did a school out the back of, I'm sorry if anybody's come from St Mary's, but I use that as a lower socio-economic in the middle of the Western Sydney or out of Sydney, we'll probably be getting numbers out there of 10, 12% going to independent school, if not less. So what value can we achieve? So our view is by understanding the available information really makes for better business decisions. We can understand the mapping and where the current students come from. We can look at mapping and data and say where our future students expected to come from. We can identify the future growth areas of population, where the students are going to be, and you can make some serious marketing decisions. Now, people sometimes say to me, what sort of marketing decisions? And I don't have a ponytail on the back of my head like Steve Vizard did, but I use the example of, imagine my budget said I was going to put 10 bus shelters, I was going to put my school sign in the bus shelter. You can't get much more simple. It's available to be able to move from place to place. Where would I put my 10 bus shelters to get the best bang for my buck? And would I be thinking about the children for next year, or would I be thinking about the children 5, 10 years out? So if you think of it in terms of bus shelters and you can look at future growth, you start being able to say, well, maybe I'll put them out in these growth corridors. Would I put one immediately in the front of my school? Probably not. I actually had a funny situation where a major school in South Australia said they've always been tempted to put their sign outside the front of the other school, just to sort of add a bit of flavour and stir up. But I'm not there to advocate those things. The next thing we can obviously achieve by looking at data is our bus routes. Number one, we can look at where our bus routes are. Number two, we can look at where our students currently are. We can look at, thirdly, where our future students are going to come from. And we can look at, fourthly, where the potential students are going to come from and whether our bus routes are currently, whether we're going to have to modify them in the future to make that. And really, I must summarise by saying our motto at Spectrum Analysis has always been use data to make better business decisions. And I must say, in schools, I'm seeing more of it, which I love to see, but I truly believe schools are great at saying we do a strategic plan. I've always been in having a strategic plan, in that most of you, or some of you may know, my background was 20 years with Caltex, the oil company, and Caltex obviously were very big on a strategic plan for a zone, a territory, whatever we had. You had to have a plan based on facts and data, and not the sort of soft data. It was hard numbers of what our current sales were, what our targets were, what we were going to do the next year and the year after. And I guess that to me is what schools should be thinking, especially when it comes to the most important thing, or one of the most important things, is what is our student enrolment going to be? Because that's our money coming in, and that's what the rest of the school runs off. So using facts and data to make better business decisions has always been our motto at Spectrum, and I'm very happy to push that going forward. So I'm very happy to take any questions now. I notice I'm at, I've got 15 minutes all up. So I'll let Sue and Dorianne, anything can come through by question to me or through the chat lines, and I'll do my best to address it.
Thank you, Peter. We've just put a few links in the chat. So if you haven't been following the chat, feel free to scroll through there. We've got details of the next event on the 22nd of April at 12 p.m, which is about locating and engaging with alumni for schools, colleges and universities. So that will be at 12 p.m, so more closer to lunchtime, and we hope to see lots of you back for that one. Alistair Lee's on the call, so Alistair, you might like to pop your camera on and wave to everybody. Him and I will be presenting on how to manage, there he is. Hi Alistair. In fact, why don't you just give us a brief intro whilst we got you there on the screen, if you just unmute. There you go. Perfect.
So I'm going to be talking a little bit about, I suppose, with the benefit of, 20 years experience behind me in education advancement, talking about 10 rules, if you like, that can set you up for success in alumni and also in fundraising for that matter as well. So I'm looking forward to presenting in a month's time. Yeah.
Great, excellent. And I'll be obviously focusing on how you can use LinkedIn to connect with your alumni and make use of that incredible resource. So keep putting your questions in the chat. We're happy to answer them either live, so you can just unmute and bring yourself up on the main screen, or you can pop them in the chat. Now, during the presentation, Peter, Alexandra Peters said she would really like to know, when we were looking at those two comparison schools in Mosman and Rowville, I think, or was it, no, Mosman and Truganina. But anyway, she was really interested in knowing more about the competition in the area, and that's what Spectrum does for school clients, isn't it?
Okay. So let me start off by saying we have set up a mapping system, which if anyone has not seen what we call GeoMapping Plus, which is something we've done with John Somerset, the very first layer of that, which anybody will be able to access, is all the RRA data map. So
Peter, your
can
microphone is not working very well. Have you? Yeah. Can you just get a little bit closer?
Okay. So what this does is it means you can go into our mapping, which is free.
Yeah. No, we can't hear you. We might have to swap computers. Can you just mute yourself and then unmute, and we'll see if that fixes the recording sound. Yeah, no, we're still getting one. So I might get you to come in and use my computer, and then you can keep doing that.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, a minor technical glitch. Come and Sue can stand with me. Okay, so the free web-based mapping, which you can look up, and we're happy Sue will provide in a little thing called GeoMapping Plus. It gives us every one of the 9,000 schools with its ACARA data. So we can click on any school and see how many students, what the address is, how many teachers, how many full-time equivalent teachers there are. So you can run around your own school and look at all the competition, very much like that. You can then go on to what's called the My Schools data, and you can actually look up each school. You'd be amazed what's showing for every school in the My Schools data, including that discussion I had about what the funding is, how much contributions they get from general funding, and what that is approximately on an average per student. So happy to share with you the web-based mapping, which is free. And I've just pushed that what we do is there's a free-based one called GeoMapping Plus that anyone can have. There's the next level up, has a couple of layers behind it that all of John Somerset's members and people who work with him can get to. There's the next one up, which John and I have as a subscription one, which has all the data I've shown already today set up in mapping. So you can go in and look at the Truganinas and look at all of these things how you want to. That's a subscription base. And then the fourth one is some schools then say, right, we love that, but we want to then add our own students, our own alumni, our own future students. Can you do a separate mapping for us? And we do that for some schools. And then the fifth one is where they actually get a full-blown project done, which we're obviously happy to do. But the mapping is really critical, and a lot of schools are now finding this mapping makes it much more of a DIY type thing. You might have the headmaster come racing through your door saying, how many people, we think we should market in this area or that area, or where's the growth going to be, because he read in the paper there's going to be a new development in 2058. You've got the actual facts and data then to say, well, hang on, this is what the ABS is saying. So all the data is available. The simple stuff of the ACARA data will show you the schools, and if you haven't got it, we'll just give it to you. It's free.
Yeah.
It's on our websites anyway.
Great question, Alexandra. Now, Kumesh has asked, is data for independent schools broken down further into faith-based schools, Christian, Anglican, Muslim, etc.?
Okay, so the census, no, but what the census does do, the census asks you what your faith was. So again, for every SA1 and every SA2, we can see what percentage of people went to, or said they were Christian, then the sub part of that is Catholic versus Anglican and various other denomination, Lutheran and Protestant, different things there. And then you can see the Hindu, you can see Islamic. And it's interesting though, because when you get down to the bottom, which is people who said no faith or agnostic or atheist, I guess I'll call it, there is quite a big 40% of people sort of put themselves in those categories. Now, the Islamic people probably do put themselves more, very few would probably put themselves at that. That'd be they're either Islamic or they're not. So they probably report better in the census than often the Christian and the various Christian people do. But the net effect is we can actually see what faith people said they were, what percentage in each denomination. And again, in our mapping, we have on-off layers to look at SA2 and even, I think it's suburb level, that you can sort of see where the highest concentrations of different religions are. So the religion's there, but it doesn't then say from that, okay, these children are of that religion. All it says is there's an area, we can work out what children go to government, independent or Catholic school, and we can also then look at that area and see what percentage of people reported themselves as different religions.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Peter. Now, is anybody game enough to unmute their microphone and ask a question in front of the group? Because now's your chance. And if not, by all means, you can reach out to Peter or Dorianne directly after. So maybe while we're waiting for any other questions to come through, Dorianne, would you like to introduce yourself as one of the newest members of the Spectrum team? Just unmute, yeah.
Yes. Hi, everyone. It's great to be with Spectrum Analysis and joining in on this first webinar. And I look forward to connecting with as many of you as possible. And I hope you've taken away some thought-provoking ideas around how Spectrum can help schools better plan for the future.
Okay, thank you, Dorianne. I'll welcome Dorianne. She started with us last week. She has a very strong background through schools and universities, especially universities. She's done many, many years with Deakin and was very involved with their alumni programs. And that's really, she has been in the schools and universities and colleges. And I'm hoping some of the people maybe here that are from universities and colleges, because quite simply, it's the same game. And we are very keen to have a chat to any of those as well, because we believe they have the same issues, especially at the moment with universities and colleges, with obviously international students not around or very minimal. Then they're obviously needing to engage with as many domestic students as they possibly can, and having information on where these people are would have to be something they should be looking at. So welcome, Dorianne, and you will be very involved in helping us with all of our schoolwork as we go forward. Okay, if there are any other questions, happy to take them. Please let us know.
Just so that you all know, this session has been recorded, so we will be putting that up on YouTube later today. So if there's somebody you know who would like to receive a copy, when you get your email, it will actually give you the link to the recording, so that if there's somebody else in your team or at another friend who might find it of use, feel free to pass it on. There's also some great resources on the spectrumanalysis.com.au website. So if you look on there, you'll also see there's a special page specifically for schools. So you're welcome to check that out. And you would have also seen in the chat that you can follow us on social media. And if you're not already, you'll be added to the Strategy News for Schools email newsletter. So you'll get updates from us as well. And we hope you found this seminar enjoyable. I'm just here on the side, my voice with the screen. So thank you, Diana, for your message, acknowledging Peter and the team. Appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for your participation today. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Dorianne. And we look forward to seeing you in April with Alistair, when we can talk about engaging with your alumni as another really important aspect of schools, colleges and universities. So any final questions? It's like the last bid at the auction.
Going, gone. We're done.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much
Thanks,
for joining
everyone.
us, and look forward to speaking with many of you soon.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.